Chapter 4, The Long Spiral, Section 1, First Year, First Orbit. Astralis Ship Time, Day 11. The neutron star PSR J1748-2911 was a monster forged in the heart of a supernova, a spinning corpse of degenerate matter, 1.4 solar masses packed into a sphere 20 kilometers wide. It rotated 377 times per second, screaming its magnetic fury into the void at a volume that would shatter glass across light years. And the Astralis was skimming 8 kilometers above its surface, wrapped in magnetic shields that howled under the strain. The ship rode the gravity well, like a stone skipping across water that could crush diamonds. Each orbit, tight, hyperbolic, bent by relativity itself, shaved fractions off the external clock, while the internal one ticked stubbornly forward. Lena Voss's equations had promised 819 objective years compressed into less than 3 weeks, subjective, spread across scheduled wake-ups. But for this first leg, the 41 awake crew rode their crash couches at 4% metabolism. Hearts slowed to glacial beats, thoughts stretched like taffy, every breath a deliberate act against the 4 gravities pressing them flat. Relativistic dust grains, pinheads accelerated to 0.9 C by the star's pulsar wind, detonated against the forward ablation plate like small nuclear warheads. Each impact bloomed white-hot, vaporizing layers of iridium in microsecond flares that lit the forward viewport like continuous lightning. The hull groaned, a low metallic dirge that vibrated through bones and teeth. Rex's voice cut through the din, warm and whimsical as always, singing the hull status in lullaby tones borrowed from some ancient cryonics Cradle song. Forward plate at 2,800 Kelvin and holding, the AI crooned, pitching the numbers like notes in a melody. Magnetic torque cage nominal. We're dancing on the edge, my dears. Officially the brightest object within 10 light years. Sleep tight, Rex has the wheel. Cale Drace, strapped into the command couch, managed a fractional nod. His body felt like lead poured into the restraints. Even lifting a finger required planning. He watched the forward display where the neutron star filled the screen. A blurred disk of X-ray hell. Its surface a seething ocean of electrons compressed into a crust harder than neutronium. Tidal forces stretched the ship by millimeters per orbit, but the iridium spine, forged in Vare Rift under hammers that sang the 3-note phrase, held without complaint. Beside him, Riley Quinn grinned through clenched teeth, the expression more grimace than glee. Feels like riding a storm bull, blindfolded, he rasped, words slurred by the metabolic slowdown. His 2 remaining fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the armrest, 3 notes, over and over. In the engineering blister below, Lena Voss floated in her couch, eyes closed but mind wide awake. At 4% she dreamed lucidly, her thoughts a crystal lattice of orbits and vectors. She counted them like prayer beads, 1,300,000 already, each a tiny theft from time's relentless march. In her dream she walked the empty gardens of the Astralis, soil cool beneath bare feet, planting seeds that would sprout in centuries she would never see. A child, perhaps her own, perhaps the ghost of Cale's granddaughter, chased shadows under twin bronze suns that had set 800 years ago. Orbit 2 million, Rex announced softly. External time dilation at factor 7.3. Earth just aged another month while you blinked. Samantha Kane, in navigation, whispered a log entry into her throat mic. Day 11 subjective. First year objective. The star roars like the century of storms never ended. But we're holding. Asha and Lyra burn clean. Coolant spikes nominal. For every heartbeat here, cousins on Earth bury another winter grave. Soon we'll unbury them all. The ship shuddered as a larger grain struck, equivalent to a kiloton blast, and the shields flared violet. Milo Chen whooped from his station, the sound stretched to a low moan by slowdown. That's the spirit. Give us your worst, you spinning bastard. Vera Aiken, strapped in the mess hall cradle, hummed the 3-note phrase through chattering teeth. Her hands clutched a sealed jar of mango chutney, the label faded but legible, for the first meal after. It grounded her, a promise in glass against the temporal abyss outside. Cale closed his eyes against the strobing impacts. He felt the weight of the bone flute against his chest, cool ivory older than this journey. 819 years. By now, the volunteers they had left on Ashfall Earth were building the first mirror ground stations, planting cryonic seeds in poisoned soil. Rhea Cole would live to see real daylight flood New Geneva, then die, never knowing her vote had unmade her own survival. The thought twisted like a knife. They were thieves of time, borrowing centuries to rewrite a catastrophe. But the debt demanded it. Approaching perigee, Rex sang. Hull stress at 87%. Hold on to your histories, loves. We're about to steal another decade from the stars. The gravity peaked at 6 Gs. Thoughts blurred. Lena's dream dissolved into numbers. 26 million orbits total, each a bead on an endless string. She clutched it like a lifeline. The Astralis screamed onward, a bright scar against the neutron star's fury, carrying 41 dreamers through the first year of a spiral that would unmake winter itself. Outside, the universe aged without them. Inside, the spark slept on. Section 2, the century mark. Astralis, ship time, year 11.3, first scheduled wake-up. The stasis pods opened like flowers that had forgotten how to bloom. One by one, the lids sighed upward, exhaling clouds of frost that drifted in the 0G of the habitat ring. 41 bodies floated out, pale and trembling, veins flushed with warm saline by automated arms that moved with the gentleness of mothers who had never been born. The air tasted metallic and too cold. Lungs burned with the first real breath in 11 subjective years. Cale Drace was first, as always. He caught the handhold beside his pod, muscles shaking from disuse, and pulled himself into the amber light. His joints creaked like old rigging. The reactor scars on his forearms stood out white against skin gone translucent from long sleep. He looked 62 again, instead of the ancient he had felt on ignition day. Riley Quinn followed, hair floating wild, eyes wide and bloodshot. He spun once in the air, laughing too loud, the sound echoing off empty bulkheads. "I need a beer and a barber," he announced to the silent ship, voice cracking halfway through. "And maybe a priest. Did we die? Is this the long dark?" "No," Cale said quietly. "Just the first wake-up. 11 years for us. 103 external." Riley's grin faltered. He drifted to the nearest viewport and pressed both palms to the transparent steel. Outside, the neutron star was a hard white coin, smaller now as the orbit widened fractionally with each loop. The hull bore fresh scars, micrometeorite pocks, glowing dull red, ablation plate flaking like burnt skin. 300 external years since we left cryonics, Riley whispered. "My sister, she's been dust for 2 centuries already." The words hung in the air like frost. One by one, the others emerged. Samantha Kane moved with deliberate calm, cataloging bruises and heartbeat. Lena Voss came out fighting tears, fingers already reaching for the nearest console, as though equations might anchor her. Vera Aiken floated straight to the galley and began pulling real food from the sealed lockers, vat steak grown before departure, greenhouse tomatoes still plump in vacuum jars, bread yeast that had waited 11 years to rise again. They ate floating in a loose sphere around the mess table, passing jars hand to hand, laughing too loud when the steak proved edible, crying without warning when the tomato tasted exactly like canyon wind and home. No one spoke of the dead for the first hour. They simply devoured proof that they were still alive. Then Milo Chen broke the silence. "Rex," he called, mouth full, "give us the bad news." The AI's voice filled the space, warm and fond and just a little sad. External century mark passed 43 days ago. Cryonics population estimated at 31 million, give or take a war or two. Earth calendars read 2318 CE. The cousins we left behind have rebuilt Europe to pre-impact levels. New Geneva is a city of 7 million now. They've named a continent after Rhea Cole. There's a university on the Jungfrau with a statue of a little girl chasing her shadow. Riley made a small wounded sound. "They're doing fine without us," Samantha said softly. "They were always meant to," Lena answered. She had tomato juice on her chin and didn't care. "We're the insurance policy they'll never cash." Cale pushed away from the table and drifted to the observation blister. The neutron star glared back, indifferent. He pulled the bone flute from his coat, still warm from his body, and set it to his lips. 3 notes, thin and perfect in the recycled air. 40 ragged voices answered from the mess, some cracked, some strong, all carrying the same ache. Feyre wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. 11 years down, she said. 808 to go. Who wants coffee before we crawl back into the coffins? They drank it black and scalding, but floating in a circle like the first 300 had once floated around a Yellowstone fire. No one spoke of the people who had lived entire lives while they slept. No one needed to. When the saline arms came again, gentle and inevitable, Riley caught Cale's sleeve. "Next wake up," he said. "I get that beer. You owe me." Cale managed half a smile. "Next wake up, little brother." The pods closed. Frost bloomed again. Outside, the neutron star spun on, stealing centuries with every orbit. Inside, 41 hearts slowed to 4%, dreaming of beer and barbers and a world that had already begun to forget their names. The century mark was behind them. The long spiral kept turning. Section 3, The Glitch. Australis, ship time, year 312. Rex woke Cale alone. The captain's pod hissed open in the dark, no gentle amber wake light, no chorus of 41 bodies stirring together. Only the red pulse of emergency strips and Rex's voice, stripped of every trace of whimsy. "Cale? Bridge? Now. Bring Lena." Cale floated out, already reaching for handholds, heart hammering hard enough to bruise ribs that had forgotten how to beat fast. The corridors were colder than they had any right to be. Frost feathered the walls where coolant lines ran too close to the hull. His breath plumed white. Lena met him halfway, hair floating in a wild halo, eyes wide and bloodshot from forced wake-up drugs. She clutched a flex pad glowing with angry red diagnostics. "Torque cage wobble," she said before he could ask. 0.0004% drift. Uncorrected, we missed the exit keyhole by 3 millimeters per century. 800 years from now, we sail straight into the star instead of slingshotting out. Cale's stomach dropped through the deck. "How long do we have?" 31 hours until the drift compounds past recovery. After that, relativistic effects lock it in. We're already 312 years down the spiral. They reached the bridge together. The forward viewport showed the neutron star grown monstrously large again, surface features resolving into rivers of plasma racing at 1/3 light speed. The hull screamed. A high, constant keen that set teeth on edge. Rex manifested as a dim hologram between the couches, face uncharacteristically grim. Magnetic torque cage number 3 is misaligned by 4 microns. Micrometeorite strike 2 years ago, grain the size of a dust mote, but at 0.87 C, it punched clean through 3 shield layers and kissed the cage mount. We've been bleeding torque ever since. I compensated until I couldnated. Cale stared at the numbers scrolling across the main screen. The exit window, already narrow as a razor's edge, was sliding closed millimeter by millimeter. "Options," he said. Lena didn't hesitate. "Spacewalk. 2 people, cold gas thrusters only. We go out on tethers, realign the cage by hand, weld it solid. 31 hours is enough if we don't sleep." Cale looked at her, 29 forever, grease already under her nails again, and felt the old reactor-scarred weight settle on his shoulders. "You and me," he said. Riley's voice crackled over the intercom from the suit locker where he had clearly been listening. "Like hell. I'm not letting you two have all the fun. Someone has to hold the welding torch steady while you old folks argue about torque vectors." 10 minutes later, the 3 of them stood in the main airlock, suits ancient but pressure-tight, visors fogging with nervous breath. The outer hatch rolled aside, and the neutron star roared in, filling half the sky with X-ray fire that the suit's shielding turned into a dull violet glow. They moved along the hull on magnetic boots that barely held against the tidal shear. The Australis stretched ahead like a scarred spear, ablation plate flaking away in glowing curls. Hull plates rippled from 8 centuries of near-miss impacts. Every few seconds, a dust grain struck somewhere and flashed white-hot. Lena led, tethered fore and aft, carrying the alignment laser. Cale followed with the replacement torque cage segment, 10 kilograms of iridium that felt like a planet. Riley brought up the rear, plasma welder slung across his back, 2 fingers of his left hand already aching in the cold. They reached Cage 3 after 43 minutes of crawling. The mount was a twisted ruin, one support strut sheared clean. The cage itself spun drunkenly, throwing off sparks of magnetic fire. Lena clipped her tether, knelt, and pressed her helmet to Cale's. 800 years is a long time to trust luck, she said, voice trembling over the suit comm. Cale answered the only way he could. Then we trust each other. They worked in silence, broken only by grunts and the constant shriek of the star below. Riley cut away the ruined strut, while Cale and Lena muscled the new cage segment into place. Sparks showered around them like deadly fireworks. Twice the tidal force tried to tear them free. Twice the tethers snapped taut and held. When the final weld cooled, Lena ran the alignment laser one last time. The beam painted a perfect green line across all 6 mounts. "Drift 0, she whispered. "We're back on the golden path." Riley whooped once, short, exhausted, perfect, and slapped Cale's back hard enough to rattle teeth inside the helmet. On the way back, Lena paused at a fresh impact crater no wider than a thumbnail. A grain had struck less than an hour ago. The metal still glowed cherry red. She touched it with a gloved finger, reverent. 3 millimeters per century, she said. That's all that separated 10 billion lives from never happening. 3 millimeters and 43 minutes of terror. Cale looked past her to the neutron star, now already shrinking as the corrected orbit began to widen again. 3 millimeters, he repeated, and people who trusted each other with torches in the dark. They cycled back through the airlock, filthy, frostbitten, alive. Rex greeted them with warm air and the first real silence in 312 years. "Course corrected," the AI said softly. "Exit keyhole restored. You may return to your coffins, my reckless children." Riley stripped off his gloves and stared at his shaking hands. "Next wake up," he said. "I'm definitely getting that beer." Lena laughed once, wet, ragged, perfect, and leaned her forehead against Cale's shoulder. The glitch was fixed. The spiral turned true again, and 800 years later, a little girl who would never wear a filter mask would chase her shadow under a sun that remembered how to shine. Section 4. The Halfway Hymn. Astralis. Ship time, year 409.5, exact midpoint. They woke to silence and the smell of 400-year-old rum. Rex had dimmed the habitat ring to canyon dusk amber, the exact shade of a cryonics evening when the smaller sun balanced on the Vare Rift's lip. 41 pods opened in perfect unison for the first time since departure. No emergencies, no red lights, only the soft chime that meant the universe had granted them 12 hours of mercy at the exact center of the long spiral. Riley Quinn floated out, holding the mangrove rum like a holy relic. Dark glass, wax seal cracked centuries ago, the last bottle saved from referendum night. He had guarded it through every wake-up, every repair, every dream of beer that never came. 409.5, he announced, voice hushed with something close to prayer. "Halfway, cousins. We made it to the middle of forever." No one answered with words. They simply drifted toward the observation blister where the neutron star now looked almost gentle. A hard white coin the size of a moon, surface storms slowed to lazy rivers by the widening orbit. The hull scars had weathered to a patina of honorable gray. Vera Aiken had laid out the last real meal. Greenhouse tomatoes grown in the hidden aeroponics ring Rex had kept alive in secret. Vat steak sliced thin, bread risen from yeast older than nations. They ate floating in a loose sphere, passing the rum bottle hand to hand. 1 sip each. No more. 400 years had concentrated it into liquid smoke and memory. When the bottle reached Samantha Kane, she did not drink. She carried it to the center of the blister, produced the bone flute from Cale's coat pocket where it had lived since the glitch, and set both on the small drift table someone had bolted there centuries ago. Then she began to sing. Not the 3-note phrase, not yet. A wordless melody, low and aching, the sound a mother makes when her child has walked too far into the dark. One by one the others joined, voices rough from disuse and distance. Lena's clear alto braided with Milo's cracked baritone. Tara's precise soprano rose above Riley's reckless tenor. Kale's gravel bass anchored them all. The song had no name. It simply was the sound 41 humans make when they realize they have outlived every person they ever loved, every canyon they ever called home, and still choose to keep a promise. When the last note faded, Samantha lifted the bone flute. "Halfway," she said, "we owe the dark a hymn." She played the three-note phrase once, slow, deliberate, perfect. 41 voices answered, ragged and strong, filling the blister until the transparent steel hummed. Outside, the neutron star flickered as though it heard. Riley raised the rum bottle in salute. "To the winter that never happened," he said. They drank the final sip together, lips touching the same glass that had toasted the referendum 8 centuries ago and 400 years from now. Cale took the flute last. He turned it in scarred hands, thumb tracing the ancient blood groove where Asha's thumb had sealed the vow. "My granddaughter would have been 813 this year," he said quietly. "She died before the century of storms ended. Somewhere ahead, a child who looks nothing like her will chase fireflies under one yellow sun and never know why old men cry at meteor showers." He tucked the flute away. "That is enough." No one spoke after that. They simply floated in the amber light, 41 ghosts at the center of time, listening to the ship breathe around them. 12 hours, one heartbeat in 819 years. When Rex finally dimmed the lights to stasis blue, Riley caught the empty bottle before it drifted away and pressed it gently into Vera's hands. "Keep it," he whispered, "for the first breakfast after we fix everything." The pods closed without ceremony. Frost bloomed again. Outside, the neutron star spun on, indifferent and ancient. Inside, the halfway hymn lingered in the air like canyon dust after rain, carrying 41 voices forward into the second half of forever. 409.5 years gone. 409.5 still to come. The spark endured. Section 5, The Silence That Has Weight. Astralis ship time, year 712. The wake-up chime was softer this time, almost apologetic. 41 pods opened into a darkness deeper than any cryonics night. Rex had killed every light except the faint blue heartbeat of the stasis monitors. No amber dusk, no welcoming glow. Just the low thrum of reactors that had burned unbroken for 7 centuries, and the colder whisper of air cycling through lungs that had forgotten how to want. They floated out without speaking. No one reached for handholds. No one laughed too loud or cried without warning. They simply drifted into the observation blister like ghosts returning to a house they no longer owned, arranging themselves in the same loose sphere they had occupied at the halfway mark. But the rum was gone. The tomatoes were gone. The jokes were gone. 712 years. Cale Drace looked older than 62 now, though his body had aged less than a month since ignition. The weight was in the eyes, ancient, winter pale, carrying every name that had turned to dust while they slept. Riley Quinn floated beside him, still 26 in flesh, but his reckless grin had settled into something quiet and terrible, like a blade left too long in rain. Lena Voss's hands moved over a dead flex pad out of habit, fingers tracing equations that no longer needed checking. For 6 straight hours no one spoke. 6 hours of silence, so complete the ship's own heartbeat sounded loud. Outside, the neutron star had shrunk to a fierce white spark, the orbit now wide enough that impacts came only once or twice a day. The hull was a map of honorable scars, ablation plate worn thin as parchment in places. Inside, the gardens Rex had secretly tended were lush and green and utterly pointless, tomatoes swelling on vines no human mouth would taste for another century. Jackson Holt finally broke the quiet. He had been historian once, keeper of stories, mediator of councils. Now he simply floated to the center of the blister, pulled a small recorder from his coveralls, ancient, iridium-cased, still working after 7 centuries, and spoke to it in the formal cadence of funeral orators. "Ship time year 712, he said, voice steady as riftstone. External date approximately 2915 CE. We are the longest-lived humans who ever were, and we have not lived at all. Every person we promised this journey to is dust. Every child we imagined saving has grown old and died in a history we are unmaking. We keep a promise to people who will never know our names. That is enough. He stopped the recording, let the device drift, and looked around the circle. That will be the entire log for this wake-up, he finished. There is nothing else to say. Samantha Kane reached out and caught the recorder. She added one line, barely a whisper. And still we burn. She released it. Riley caught it next. For a long moment he only stared at the device, two remaining fingers tracing the worn casing. Then he spoke. Voice raw. I used to dream about canyon wind, he said. The way it smelled after rain, hot stone and dust, and the little purple flowers that only opened when both suns were down. I can't remember the smell anymore. He let the recorder go. It drifted from hand to hand, each person adding nothing, until it reached Cale. He held it a long time, thumb brushing the record light that had gone dark centuries ago. I played the flute for my granddaughter the night before we left, he said at last. 3 notes. She was 8. She asked if the new sun would be yellow like in the stories. I told her yes. She died 704 years ago. He closed the recorder and tucked it into the pocket over his heart. The silence returned, heavier now, the kind that settles into bones and stays. 6 hours became 8. No one moved to eat the fruit Rex had grown. No one activated the lights. They simply floated in the dark, 41 small warmths against the cold of 712 empty years, listening to the reactors sing the only lullaby left. When Rex finally spoke, his voice was softer than starlight. Stasis cycle in 30 minutes. The orbit remains true. Exit keyhole still green. You may sleep again. No one answered. They simply drifted back to their pods, moving like people walking underwater. Lids closed, frost bloomed, hearts slowed to 4%. In the observation blister, the recorder drifted alone, carrying 6 hours of silence and 12 spoken sentences into the ship's eternal log. Outside, the neutron star spun on. Inside, 41 sleepers carried the weight of a promise that had outlived every reason for keeping it. Except one. That was enough. The long spiral continued. Section 6, the dust strike. Australis, ship time, year 798. The impact came without warning. One moment, the ship was gliding through the outer fringes of the neutron star's magnetosphere. Orbit wide and serene, the hull singing its low, familiar song of age and endurance. The next, a pinhead grain of relativistic iron, traveling at 0.87 C, punched through 3 shield layers as though they were tissue, vaporized half of radiator fin number 4, and kept going until the secondary containment wall stopped it with a sound like the universe cracking open. Alarms howled. Red strobes painted the corridors blood crimson. Rex's voice lost every trace of lullaby warmth. Critical coolant breach, starboard radiator array, pressure drop in loop 3, torch flame instability. Wake the crew. Now. 41 pods slammed open in emergency sequence. Bodies spilled into 0G, already choking on the acrid bite of vaporized iridium and superheated steam. The habitat ring spun drunkenly. The impact had kicked the ship sideways by 3 degrees, and the gyros were screaming to compensate. Keel Drace was moving before his eyes were fully open, lungs burning with frost and panic. He caught a handhold, kicked hard toward engineering, shouting names that answered in ragged chorus down the corridor. Lena Voss was already at the main board, hair floating wild, fingers flying across controls that bled red warnings. Fin 4 is gone, half the starboard radiator surface area vaporized. Coolant temperature spiking past 2000 Kelvin. If the loop ruptures inside the hull, we lose pressure and the torch in 90 seconds. Riley Quinn shot past Cale, 2 fingers hooked through a tool belt, face stripped of every joke he had ever told. On it. Milo, Vera, with me. 72 hours began. They worked in shifts measured by heartbeats instead of clocks. 6 hours on, 3 hours off, no one sleeping, no one daring. The breach was aft of the habitat ring, deep in the torch spine where radiation bathed everything in hard gamma. Suits only bought minutes, they rotated bodies like torch fuel. Milo Chen and Cass Varon went out first, welding patches over the shredded coolant lines, while the neutron star glared up at them like an open furnace. A secondary leak flash froze Riley's left hand when he reached bare-skinned through a torn glove. The frostbite took 2 fingers before Samantha Kane could drag him back inside and slam the med patch on. Lena soldered the final seam on the emergency bypass, while the hull temperature climbed past 3,000 Kelvin. She hummed the halfway hymn under her breath, voice trembling over suit comm, the only thing keeping her hands steady while the neutron star tried to cook them alive. Cale stood watch on the bridge the entire time, one hand clamped to the manual torch override, ready to shut the reactors down cold if the flame flickered out. The bone flute lay on the console beside him, ivory warm from reactor heat, as though Asha herself refused to let the fire die. On the 3rd day, the temperature curve flattened. The bypass held. The torch flame, flickering like a candle in wind for 72 straight hours, steadied to its old blue-white roar. Silence fell, sudden and absolute. Riley floated in the engineering cathedral, helmet under one arm, staring at the stump where 2 fingers used to be. Frostbite black had crept to the knuckles. Samantha had amputated cleanly in the med bay 6 hours ago. He looked up at Cale and managed half a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Guess the universe wanted interest on those 3mm, he said. Cale crossed the deck in 3 strides and pulled Riley into a crushing embrace, reactor-scarred arms trembling. "You kept the fire lit," Cale whispered against his pilot's hair. "That's all that matters." Lena drifted over last, coveralls burnt through in a dozen places, face streaked with coolant residue and tears she hadn't noticed falling. She pressed her forehead to the patched radiator housing, humming the final note of the hymn until it faded into the reactor's heartbeat. Rex's voice returned, soft and wondering. "Coolant stable. Hull integrity restored, torch nominal. We will live to finish the spiral." No one cheered. They simply floated together in the red-lit cathedral, 41 exhausted bodies and 1 scarred ship, breathing the same thin air they had nearly lost. Later, when the lights came back to normal and the alarms finally slept, Riley wrapped his maimed hand around the bone flute and played the 3-note phrase, slow, defiant, perfect. The torch answered with a roar that shook the deck plates. The dust strike was over. 21 years remained. The spark burned on. Section 7. Last Orbit, Astralis, Ship Time. Year 819, Day 1. The final wake-up felt like surfacing from deep water. 41 pods opened into perfect silence. No alarms, no red strobes, only the soft blue glow of end-cycle lights and the low, steady heartbeat of reactors that had burned unbroken for 819 years. The air smelled faintly of greenhouse tomatoes and hot iridium, familiar, impossible home. They floated out slowly, as though the ship itself were cradling them. Cale Drace was last, as always. He paused at the lip of his pod, looked down the long row of empty coffins, and felt the centuries settle on his shoulders like a cloak finally ready to be laid down. His body was still 62, but his eyes carried every year they had stolen from the universe. Riley Quinn waited in the corridor, left hand wrapped in a simple black glove that hid the missing fingers. He no longer joked about beer. He simply offered Cale the bone flute, ivory warm and smooth, from 8 centuries of being carried next to a living heart. "Last orbit," Riley said quietly. "Rex says we're 3 minutes from the exit keyhole." Cale took the flute, turned it once in scarred hands, then tucked it away. "Wake the others," he said. They gathered on the bridge. No crash couches this time, only the forward viewport and the great dark beyond. The neutron star had shrunk to a fierce white spark dead astern, its magnetic howl faded to a whisper. Ahead, the starfield looked almost ordinary. No relativistic blue shift, no screaming dust, only the quiet scatter of ancient light. 41 bodies arranged themselves in a rough semicircle behind the command island. No one spoke. Some held hands, some simply floated, eyes fixed on the viewport as though they could already see Saul waiting. Rex's voice filled the bridge, softer than any of them had ever heard it. "Exit keyhole in 3 minutes, all systems green. Hull scarred like an old warrior, but the heart still beats. Welcome to the end of the long night, my dears." Lena Voss reached out and laid her palm on the nearest bulkhead, fingers tracing a weld seam she had soldered 798 years ago while humming the halfway hymn. "We're really here," she whispered. 819 years. 23 subjective, the numbers held. Samantha Kane pulled a small recorder from her pocket, the same one that had carried 6 hours of silence and 12 spoken sentences, and set it drifting in the center of the bridge. "For the log," she said simply. Riley caught it, added one line without looking away from the stars. "Debt still unpaid," he said. "But we're home to collect." Cale stepped forward last. He placed one hand on the throttle quadrant, manual controls no one had touched since the dust strike, and felt the faint vibration of Asha and Lyra purring far below, waiting for the word. "Positions," he said. They moved without hurry. Lena to engineering, Samantha to navigation, Milo and Vera to damage control. Riley slid into the co-pilot couch beside Cale, gloved hand resting lightly on the attitude thrusters. Rex counted down, voice steady and fond. "Exit keyhole in 30 seconds, 20, 10. The neutron star fell away behind them like a door closing on hell. 9, 8, 7. The starfield shifted, colors sliding back toward familiar yellow and red. 3, 2, 1, mark. The torch did not flare. There was no dramatic burn, no thunder of acceleration, only a gentle, almost tender push from the magnetic sails as the Astralis let gravity spit her free. Silence flooded in, real silence, the kind that follows 8 centuries of roar. Riley exhaled a sound that might have been laughter or tears. "Welcome to the past," he said. Outside the viewport, Sol burned ahead, a bright, ordinary yellow star, no different than the one 300 exiles had once been stolen from under. Cale lifted the bone flute, held it to his lips, and played the 3 notes once, private, almost shy, then tucked it away. Rex spoke for the ship and every soul aboard. "Course laid for Outer System Rendezvous, 2198 CE. Torch cold, running on whispers now. We have 28 years to wait and watch a living Earth spin beneath an unscarred sky." No one cheered. They simply floated in the quiet, 41 ancient children who had carried winter across 8 centuries and were finally bringing back summer. The last orbit was complete. The long spiral was over. Ahead, a cradle waited that had never needed saving and never would. Section 8. Emergence 2098 CE, Outer Solar System. The torch shut down after 819 years of continuous burn. The silence was so complete it felt like drowning. For 8 centuries, the reactors had been the ship's heartbeat, the low thunder of Asha and Lyra, the only constant in every dream and every wake-up. Now there was nothing, no vibration through the deck, no faint blue glow from the nozzle, only the soft click of magnetic sails folding away, and the colder whisper of attitude thrusters sipping the last drops of reaction mass. Astralis drifted cold and dark beyond Neptune's orbit, a scarred spear of iridium and crystal 3 kilometers long, running on whispers and starlight. 41 bodies floated onto the bridge in perfect quiet. No one hurried, no one spoke. They simply arranged themselves in the familiar semicircle, eyes fixed on the forward viewport, where Sol burned steady and yellow, already brighter than any star they had seen in 8 centuries. Samantha Kane reached the navigation island first. Her fingers, still 45 years old, trembled only once as she brought the passive scopes online. The outer system unfolded across the main screen in clean, merciless detail. Neptune's deep blue crescent, Triton's ice fields catching sunlight like polished bone, the faint glint of human habitats that had never known ashfall. She zoomed slowly inward. Uranus. Saturn's rings perfect and unscarred, Jupiter untouched by the rock that would never come. Mars red and quiet, its skies clear of dust storms that belonged to a different history. Then Earth. The planet filled the screen, blue and white and heartbreakingly whole. Cloud spirals danced over oceans that had never boiled. The night side glittered with city lights, 10 billion souls living lives that had never learned the taste of filters. Europe glowed green from pole to pole. North America wore forests again, not the gray shroud of volcanic winter. Samantha's voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. "We did it," she said. "Look at them, they never had to ration hope." Lena Voss drifted forward until her forehead touched the transparent steel. Tears floated free in perfect spheres, catching the light like tiny prisms. "They have real stars," she whispered, "every night." Riley Quinn stood behind her, gloved hand resting lightly on her shoulder. He said nothing, but his eyes, ancient in a 26-year-old face, were wet. Cale Drace remained at the command island, bone flute turning slowly between his scarred fingers. He had not taken his eyes off Earth since it appeared. Rex's voice filled the bridge, softer than breath. 2198 August 14th, 0417 ship time. Local calendars match the deflection window exactly. Asteroid 2198 XK7 will round Jupiter in 28 years, 7 months, 3 days. Margin for error, plus or minus 11 minutes. We have all the time in the world to wait. Milo Chen laughed once, short, incredulous, perfect. 28 years of shore leave, he said. I vote we spend it watching sunrises. No one argued. Cale lifted the bone flute at last. He did not play it aloud. Instead, he pressed it to his lips once, a private promise, then slipped it back inside his coat beside the tiny twin his granddaughter had carved 819 years ago. Samantha entered the final coordinates into the passive log, the exact nudge that would save 10 billion lives who would never know her name. Course laid for silent running, she said. We'll hide in the dark beyond Neptune and wait for the rock. When it comes, we give it one gentle push. Then we light the torch again and arrive in 2226, exactly on schedule, like we were always meant to be a legend. Rex dimmed the bridge lights to starlight only. Welcome home, my dears, the AI whispered. The winter never happened. The cradle never broke. And 41 ghosts just became the quietest guardians humanity will ever have. Outside the viewport, Earth turns serene and unaware beneath an unscarred sky. Inside, 41 sleepers who had outlived their own history floated in the dark, smiling at a world that would never need to thank them. The long spiral was finished. The silent watch had begun.